so many people have very different connotations and associations as to what chiropractic is and also what chiropractic is not. So people think of chiropractic and they think of neck or back pain, and it's like, oh, I hurt here, touch me here. And it's like, but what is this connected to? Everything else. And not just physically, but chemically, mentally, emotionally, energetically, and spiritually.
I don't know anything about chiropractic other than being in your care. So sometimes you might stand me up. Sometimes you might be standing on the table. Sometimes you're behind me. How are you doing it?
When I'm stepping into the practice, I'm really here to work through my own innate intelligence. So in chiropractic, innate intelligence is this thing that's working for you 100%. It's here to help you express as fully as possible. An example I like to use is, when you scrape your knee or you cut yourself, do you have to tell your body what to do in order to heal it and mend it and not leave a scar? No, your body just knows how to do that. And so that's your body's innate intelligence doing its thing. And so when people come in and lay on the table, the goal is to have an innate to innate connection as opposed to an educated to educated connection. Mm-hmm. This isn't about fixing anything. This is about seeing you for all that you are and supporting your nervous system and your innate intelligence and expressing more fully.
All right. Well, Gabby, welcome.
Thanks, Brett.
This is, it's been a little bit of a long time in the making, but I guess, all things at the right time. And it's awesome to have you in our new space. This is the first podcast in the new space. So I don't know, that feels right. You're
right.
The kind of person that I imagine having here. So
I'm honored to help you break it in. That's for sure.
Yeah, good. Well, it's been super fun and I've really enjoyed having you as a part of my healing, because I really think that's what you are, and we'll unpack that more. The work that you do and how you got to that. As we like to share the full journey on the podcast, but it is an interesting place maybe just to start because I think of the work that you do as very healing. And that word is probably something that means a lot of things to a lot of different people. You're, I think, a licensed chiropractor. Is that technically the
yeah.
Right? So, but that word has a lot of different meaning to a lot of people too.
Totally.
And what you and Evan do in your space doesn't feel at all to me like the way I used to associate, the work of a chiropractor. So anyway, I don't know, maybe let's start there. We'll back up into how you got there. But, why don't you just kind of share with the audience a little bit about what you do and how you would describe what the work that you do.
Totally. A big place to start, but a good launching point nonetheless.
Yeah.
When I first started the Insight space, I was actually pretty firm about not having the word chiropractic in the name of our community, of our business, of like what it is that I do, because so many people have very different connotations and associations as to what chiropractic is and also what chiropractic is not. Mm-hmm. And so the way that I was raised in chiropractic, or the lineage of chiropractic that I come from, is actually one that really deeply honors the roots of chiropractic. And so when we look back, to the late 1890s when chiropractic was brought in or birthed into the world by a guy named D.D. Palmer in Davenport, Iowa, he really founded this concept based on tone. And so tone is vibration, tone is oscillation, tone is where life force is transmitted. And we've all been in states, probably especially recently, where we experience what it feels like to be in a state of high tone in our bodies or tension, right? And it's much more challenging to transmit life force through a system that is bound up in a sense of high tone. And so this conversation of tone then takes us away from needing to fix anyone or needing to be in a state where we're cracking things and making things go click and pop. And when we look at it through that lens, there's just not much reverence for what chiropractic is. But when we take the step back and we start to look at this through this concept and this image of tone, we then come into the conversation of the nervous system. The nervous system is this transmitter of life force, of an electrical impulse that literally animates the body. physically, yes, but also chemically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And so when we choose to then interface with people and their systems through that lens, as opposed to through a lens of, oh, you're broken, come to me, let me fix you, let me do something to your body, to your system, as opposed to saying, hey, let me just witness you. Let me witness you through a lens of vitalism and vitality, meaning that we're looking at you for not just your physical body, right? But as you as a whole and connected entity to not just myself, but to every other thing that is around us. And so what people's systems are then willing to reveal and move through and integrate and release as a result of viewing somebody through a lens of true wholeness and totality. It's just a very different experience than going into some place where they're here to very mechanically just take you in.
Yeah, there is a lot there to unpack, and it probably is a big place to start. So we'll kind of tease the conversation
Sure.
there and come back to it, because there's so much, that I want to discover and discuss with you, from being in the space and having worked with you and seeing how people's nervous systems, in myself included, but, being a witness to others in this space and kind of how they're reacting to it. And, I'm also wanting to talk a lot about the mind and the body and that connection, which I think is a critical part of what it feels like, how you approach the work. In any event, though, let's kind of talk about how you got there and
Sure.
and how you landed where you are. And it's interesting to me because it is such a unique landing space. From my perspective, I don't know if there are many others out there practicing the way you do. I had never experienced it. So let's back up. We're here in Columbus. There's some roots here. Yeah, I know you've got family here, but I know your life has taken you outside and around before you came back and landed. So talk about just kind of these the early days, kind of who you were as a kid, the family dynamic that you grew up in. Just kind of take us back to the beginning.
Totally. So I grew up here in Columbus. I grew up in Bexley. I am the oldest of 3 siblings, which, does feel important to my story. I was always an athlete. I danced pretty competitively until I was about 13, and then I just absolutely fell in love with field hockey. And so all of this passion that I now have for chiropractic and serving families and walking with people in that way, I once had for field hockey. And so having my own experiences in that, I had some things come up in my body. And my earliest memory of chiropractic actually is when I was 4 or 5 years old. My mom had something called Morton's neuromas in her feet. And so when we were little, she used to tell us that she had tomatoes in her feet so we wouldn't step on them. And I came into the world just absolutely scared shitless of needles and surgery and really like medical doctors. I just felt like I would go there and there was always this question of what are they going to do to me? It never felt like something I was participating in. I felt very subjected to whatever was to be done, And so I remember from a very young age, 4 or 5, going to the chiropractor with my mom and knowing that she was getting adjusted, knowing that's where we were. We were never educated philosophically like I really strive to do for my people, my clients, my community. But regardless, what really stuck with me was that my mom didn't have to have surgery as a result of her going to the chiropractor. So that was like deeply imbued in my system from a really young age.
Interesting.
Flash forward to then being an athlete, having my own stuff, and my mom would take me to this chiropractor. And it's funny because I don't think she would actually even adjust me. I think, mostly she would do what's called ART, active release technique, which is essentially muscle work, and nothing wrong with that, right? But ultimately it's not chiropractic. But what I did experience was that I would walk in feeling one way, not being able to do this thing that I really love to do. And I would walk out feeling like I had reclaimed that for myself. So
Interesting.
This really stuck with me.
You were how old when you were starting to have that experience?
I was like 13 or 14.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. These are probably things that you look back on in hindsight, but can you tell me, like, when you had these young experiences, you're seeing your mom do this, was it just something that like later as you look back, you're like, that made an impact, or was there something more that you were feeling along the way?
The biggest impact was like this immediate sense of now I can do what I love to do. I can express myself more fully because I can like get out on the field and I can go play, or I can go for a run and not be hurting and like know that I'm bettering myself. I'm moving myself closer to that which I want. And
Yeah.
my personality really, since I was little, has always been very, I don't want to say linear, right? Because it's never fully linear. There's of course these moments of course correction and shifting and unlearning along the way, but I've always really known what I've wanted. And I was, 12 years old trying out for 7th grade field hockey and saying like, I want to play Division I field hockey in college. Did I even like fully understand the extent of what that meant? No, but I just knew that that's what I wanted. And I just didn't talk myself out of it. And then I kept on having other experiences that corroborated like, yeah, this is what I want. This is what I want. And so I had the same type of experience when it comes to chiropractic, where I just had this really strong felt sense that there's something really important here, again, without really knowing the philosophy of it. But just by my lived experience of like, I can do the thing that I love to do. And just always have loved people, so just having this opportunity to potentially work so closely with people and see them step into their quality of life, it just spoke to me really deeply.
Yeah. And you had mentioned, you said something about being the oldest of 3 and how that felt important. What did you mean by that?
Yeah. So my parents, like many of us, had a divorce that was less than pleasant. However, what that did do was really bring me very close with my brother and sister.
You were how old when they separated?
I was 12. Yeah. So my sister is 2.5 years younger than me, and my brother's 5.5 years younger. So we're all pretty staggered ages. And, I'll say I learned a lot through that experience, especially stepping into adulthood and especially through my own healing work. Really just coming to a different understanding of like maybe what was going on. Just the fact that my parents are human, were human, still are human. It just feels like something important that like as kids, it's easy to just like put parents on a pedestal and just think that they have all the answers and think that they know how to do things correctly all the time. And so I'm in this really beautiful position where I get to see a lot of parents now by way of my practice who just like are in this constant state of like honoring their humanness. And I know my parents, they're both wonderful people. They did the absolute best they could. And it's cool to be able to step back now, in my early 30s and just see them as humans, and see them for having done the absolute best that they could.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating thing for me. I also, had parents that got divorced when I was 10. And in fact, I was just doing some writing about this morning. I've been working on a book for a long time, and I was working on this part of my dad's sort of end of life, where we talked a lot about this. I think one of the beauties of adulthood and kind of just the embodied experience, you talked about that just a minute ago in a different context, but as you get older, as you experience life, you start to really be able to relate to things very differently. And I think for me, at least, that's brought a lot of emotion with it, but mostly where I've landed, and I cannot say this was always the case, but where I've landed is also with a greater understanding of the humanness, of the human experience of being a parent. In my case, comes, a lot of compassion. Totally. And so, yeah, you don't always start there, right? Especially when you're a kid. So, if this is important, it sounds like, it was a big piece of your early childhood. I am kind of curious to hear you say more about, what happened, not necessarily in your parents' marriage, but, in your experience as you were a kid, and kind of how that might have impacted your decisions in those teenage years or into your, early adulthood.
A lot of my story that I've really given a lot of attention to unwinding over the last, I'd say, decade plus is, I was very, very close with my mom growing up. I definitely had more of a strained relationship with my dad, and part of my story that I took on for whatever reason, my design, my mapping, put me here. But it was really this lens of like, I want to make my mom's life as easy as I possibly can. I want to help out as much as I can. I want her to not have to worry about me. She's worrying about enough. And so like it served me, you know, it totally served me in that time. It gave me this additional sense of purpose outside of doing well in school and enjoying time with my friends and, you know, loving playing field hockey. And like, I don't look back at my childhood and think like, wow, that sucked. You know, like I look at it with a reverence and an appreciation for how I turned out and for the joy that I experienced, because I still experienced a ton of joy and a ton of fun and a ton of laughter and playfulness and all of these things. And these are now important qualities that I want to be able to bring into my own family unit. You know, whether it's just Evan and I, or kids are in the picture, like those are things that I know that I want to bring forth. And I can say that because that's what I experienced growing up. With that, this strained relationship with my dad, I really, what I've been teasing apart, and really what I got to tease apart through the healing that I did, largely through chiropractic, was what of that story is mine in terms of my lack of, or my strong desire to not have a relationship with him or to be separate from his family. And I had to look at that, or I was given the opportunity to look at that rather, and discern like what of that is mine, what of that is my mom's, what of that is friends, what of that is society's. Like it was a whole thing to unpack. And, you know, through, again, I just keep coming back to it, like through my journey and my own healing, through what chiropractic has brought into my life, I've been really given an opportunity to claim what is authentic to me. I've been given opportunities to step into deep forgiveness and like that deep compassion that you're mentioning, where it's like, I get to choose what I want to carry with me, and I get to choose how I want to show up in relationship, and also what is not acceptable for me to show up with in relationship, whether that is coming from me and how I'm, you know, giving or not giving to others, or how someone else is showing up to me. And so you can say that my boundaries tightened up, so to speak. Yeah, it was definitely an important and pivotal time. And I'd say the unwinding of that is almost more important and pivotal in how I show up today.
Yeah. Yeah, probably. But, you know, it's also like, you know, this is sort of my worldview and the thing that I continue to lean into, and really why we have the format we do with the podcast, which is also something that kind of just organically unfolded. But I think, you know, in kind of divine perfection is all of it. Right? Because you can't necessarily unwind something that didn't get tangled up in the first place, right? So you kind of have to have all of these pieces. It's why we like to talk about the full journey. It's why, you know, I might pause on and take a little extra time talking about, you know, your parents' divorce here. Before we go talk about all of the beautiful work that you're doing, because it's all super interconnected. And, you know, this is a subject, you know, which I hadn't planned on talking about, but it's one, you know, as I said earlier, that's been coming even more and more into my forefront. The idea that, you know, you're a little younger than I am. I think things have shifted for the better. But when my parents got divorced, it was really like, you know, we say in the Jewish vernacular, it's like a shanda, right? It was like a real like sin almost, like you were sort of othered if you were divorced, or if you were a child of divorce. It was like something's wrong, or they're a troubled kid. Their parents got divorced, you know. And there was maybe some reasons for that too. You know, oftentimes people were only getting divorced then if there was infidelity or something really had happened, you know, horribly. It was always messy. You know, there weren't sort of conscious uncoupling or the sort of loving things that people do today, right? Co-parenting and so on. So it was a very different time. And I think a lot of things came with that. There were a lot of societal kind of, I don't know, you know, prejudices or expectations. There were a lot of pick a side kind of things, right? And a lot of times, you know, that was really again, not to blame anybody, not to point to any fingers. I mean, I think, in my case, I know my mom was certainly doing the absolute best she could, and probably did, many, if not all of the right things. Yeah. Right. But, there's a lot there, right? That sometimes leads young children or teenagers, a teenage girl, to have to make assumptions about how they're supposed to act and be and what roles to take on. And you can really live into that. And I would say most people live into it their entire lives. It's not just something that automatically gets unpacked. Some people might never have relationships with their father, or might harbor or take on personas of needing to be a certain way, as you described, making sure that your mom was okay. And so a lot of time it is just a story, right? And there might be factual evidence for why it was true, but it didn't have to be the only narrative. So anyway, this is something I've been kind of really looking at, that the as you said earlier, the humanness, right? That sometimes like shit happens, or people fuck up, or it's complicated, right? Or it's more than just it takes two to tango, like whatever the sayings are, right? And so it's an interesting thing. I don't know. I'll let you kind of say whatever comes to mind about it.
Sure. Yeah. I'll be so honest. There was a part of me that was like, ugh, I don't want to go here today.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not because I'm not down to talk about it, but it's like, I still notice this desire to kind of like protect my mom. And I'll just be really honest. Her and I don't have a relationship currently. And it's not because she's a bad person. She's a lovely person. Her and I just in dynamic in relationship, it's just not working right now. And so there's nothing bad or otherwise to say about it. It's just, that's just our current state. However, I did feel maybe unconsciously, like in that desire to be loyal to my mom and show her like how helpful I can be and how much I love her. I wanted to show her like, I'm with you, I'm on your side. And it's not to say I didn't have my own experiences with my dad at the time that, were less than pleasing or whatever. However, that, I definitely did, like, I choose mom. I choose mom. She's working so hard. She's doing all of these things. She's taking care of us. Like, I want to be a part of that. And, when I was 19, there was an incident that happened with my dad that led us to stop talking, pause our relationship. And at the time, I just was like, this is it, and when I was 25, I was working for this guy in Oslo, which we'll get to at some point. But every so often, like, he knew I didn't chat with my dad and that we didn't have a relationship. And every so often this guy would ask me, are you at peace with your dad? Are you at peace with your dad? And I'd be like, yeah, I'm good. I'm fine. Yes. And then there was a day, like I was doing an internship there, and I was nearing the end of this 3-month internship, and we were driving up to Oslo, and he asked me. And the night before, I'd had this dream, about my mom and my dad, and I was like, where did that come from, And then he asked me this question when I get in the car, and he goes, are you at peace? And I just paused, and something just came over me, and it was just like, no, I'm not at peace. And I just sobbed, just sobbed and sobbed and sobbed, and just started to like come to this realization of like, I don't know that that's mine. And so I really came to this place of feeling like I wanted to reach out to my dad. I truly was like, I'm unattached to an outcome and I have no expectations. And I remember, I had just graduated from chiropractic school. I was kind of like figuring out what was next. I was staying with my mom and her husband at the time. And I remember, texting a mentor of mine saying, I don't know what to do. I'm feeling this urge to reach out to my dad, and I'm so scared that my mom is going to be upset about it. And what he said to me has stuck with me. And I shared this with somebody else who's kind of in a similar situation, literally just yesterday on my table. And what he said was that my soul is teaching her soul how to forgive. And there was something of like, okay, even if she doesn't get it now, there's something else, that is productive in this, and there's something else that is happening. And this was really where I was like starting to connect to the fact that what matters most is that I'm stepping towards what is authentic and truthful for me. Mm-hmm. Dissipating narratives of who I'm supposed to be, what I thought I was, what I didn't want to be, like whatever those things were. And it was like, I have to do this for me. Yeah. And I remember going downstairs and sharing with her and her husband that I was going to reach out to Dad. Mm-hmm. And I just remember kind of like the look on their faces, and they were worried for me, but that's based on their own concepts and stories and things that they have fed or been fed, and just what their truth is. And like, that's okay. I can't do anything about that. But I just said it with just like a conviction for myself, nothing to prove, no attachment, no expectation. And, that was, what year are we? That was almost 6 years ago. Yeah. 6-7 years ago. And, it was the best decision that I've ever made to reconnect with my dad. Mm. And I went into it. We met up at a coffee shop, and we both just looked at each other and just started crying because I think you've met my dad a handful of times. Mm-hmm. Him and I are very similar. Mm-hmm. We're like totally cut from the same cloth. The humor is the same. Like, we joke that the Goldach genes run really strong. So if you see other Goldachs running around town, we all look very, very similar, in a sense. And there was just this sense of like, I'm at home in this decision, in this truth. And I just kind of let it unfold as it did. And him and I have a beautiful relationship now. We see each other multiple times a week. I can't imagine not having my dad in my life. And, I can't say that that's a direct correlation as to why my mom is not in my life. And it doesn't really matter, because I'm doing what is truthful for me, and I'm open to that evolving and shifting. And it's okay. Mm-hmm. It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And I appreciate you sharing that. And yeah, it's a funny thing, life. And, I think if you are trying, as you are, to just continue to listen to yourself and trust yourself and live fully into your authentic self, whatever that means, in the moment at the time. Mm. And it does get complicated because, you do have these relationships, and family is, one that is probably more complicated than any other relationship, where you care about people and you want to be, to some degree, at least I do, I want to be mindful of that. I want to be respectful of that. I want to honor that. At times, sometimes that means there's conflict with how I want to be and my desire to be, respectful and honor my family. And so, you have to just kind of do the best you can, and choose along the way what matters most. And for me, sometimes, that's choosing me, and sometimes that's choosing family. And it's a constant balance. So, it sounds to me like that's what you're doing, and I admire that. And that might mean that it changes over time too, right? And it might mean that you don't get it right at each step. And sometimes only time will tell. Yeah. But I do think, it's funny, at the end of my dad's life, I remember feeling like, boy, thank God that I also went a long time without speaking to my dad for a variety of reasons. And I was so grateful that we, in the end, were able to come back into one another's lives, and to have the relationship that we did, and to have all the conversations that we had about what happened. And I had felt like I had really repaired and healed that wound, and I had, except that when he passed, all I could think about was, boy, I wish we had done it sooner. And I don't know that that was available even. And I question that. It's been 2 years since he passed, but I'm still thinking about it. And it's sort of like I heard this total, non sequitur, but I heard Ryan Day say the other day that the first thing he thought about after we beat Michigan this year was, God, I wish we had beaten them last year. Right? So in any event, I think these things, like I said, they're complicated, they're hard, and you do the best you can. But when you're a kid and you're put in these situations, you're not really equipped to really be necessarily doing it in some sort of solid self. So let's talk a little bit about, what happens for you as you start to, go into your young adulthood. You mentioned Oslo. How did you end up there? Or tell me about kind of this, next phase of your life as you get into college and into your, your early career.
So I ended up playing Division I field hockey at Miami. I went in undecided just to give myself some space to explore other options. And, lo and behold, I come back to majoring in kinesiology because I've always had that tug of like, I want to be a chiropractor. Really didn't know why. I do absolutely have my mom to thank for raising us in a way where we were truly like a very healthy family. We moved our bodies, we ate clean food, we like did the things that are deemed like more holistic now, just in terms of like lifestyle and those specific pillars. And so I had always lived this life of finding those things to be really deeply important and critical in terms of how I was going to navigate my day to day. And so fast forward, I ended up going to chiropractic school at Logan University in St. Louis. So I got to live in the Lou for 3 years. And I just remember starting chiropractic school and like sitting in class and just feeling more myself than I literally ever had in my entire life. So I just kept getting these like little bits of affirmation that like, this is the right path. And again, by the grace of fucking God, I like didn't talk myself out of this. I just like followed it. So, my grandparents on my dad's side are Polish. They're Holocaust survivors. And so we grew up, around multiple languages, multiple cultures. Some of my best friends were growing up were Russian, Ukrainian. I was in their house every night. Like I just had this affinity and this curiosity for other cultures. And so because I was playing field hockey in college, I didn't get to study abroad. I was like so devastated at the time, And the beautiful thing about chiropractic is that I can do this job virtually anywhere on the planet. Katie's joking about, me adjusting her here. And it's like, you were saying she doesn't have a table. And it's like, well, guess what? I don't really need one. The table is a luxury at this point,
I did actually think about that as I was like getting ready to come down here. I'm like, well, sometimes I stand up and she gets me on the wall. So I'm like, maybe I just get a quickie.
The waller. We'll just open that heart space right up. I was thinking about that for Katie, so I'm not ruling it out.
Okay.
But yeah, so I can do this anywhere on the planet. And it just sent me into this desire to go be elsewhere. And I had a close friend at the time who had traveled a little bit, and she just like she was in Maui, and she like got off the plane and she was just like on the ground in Maui, and she was like, this is home. And so I watched her go through this, and I was like, well, if she could do that, like I can go and find somewhere else, that really speaks to me. And so I forged this opportunity to go work in Norway for a little bit. So I did an internship in Norway in a town called Tønsberg, which is the oldest town in Norway, lo and behold. It's about 90 minutes south of Oslo, and it's just this little village. And so I went and did this internship for this American chiropractor who was with a Norwegian woman who was a chiropractor, and just was like totally absorbed into their community. And I just had this feeling in that internship that if I were to go and do that he would offer me a job to come back after I graduated school and got a visa and all that kind of stuff. And that's really what happened. So I graduated from chiropractic school in December of 2018, so 7 years ago. And August 2019, I was able to go back to Norway. And I was so naive about moving abroad, so incredibly naive. I hadn't had any friends at the time who had lived abroad. My parents sure as shit had not lived abroad. I just was like, I'm doing chiropractic. It's going to be fine. Like, I feel held. I feel protected. It'll all work out. And like, it's not that it didn't, but it just played out differently than I could have conceived, which it does all the time,
Well, but talk about that a little bit, because I am kind of curious, and maybe I'm, connecting a dot that's not real. But you mentioned this, early on, that you have this, oldest of three,
Yeah.
and then parents get divorced, and as we know, that requires sometimes, kids to turn into adults a little faster, right? Or you grow up a little quicker, right? Sometimes you have to look out for a parent, whether you do or not, you think so,
Sure.
right? You kind of end up growing up a little bit fast. Plus, you're a D1 athlete. So that automatically says something, having been around athletes and D1 athletes, they're just kind of built different, the work ethic, the drive, sometimes the leadership skills. I mean, a lot of things sort of build the core, the toughness, the grit, the resilience. So I'm wondering, when you think about going abroad, when you think about trusting your gut, following these instincts, to follow this path of chiropractic, to follow a career path, what role did all of that play? Is it true that those things sort of all helped you go from one thing to the next, in the way that it looks, or was it some sort of kind of calling that just felt like overwhelmingly right? You tell me.
One of the biggest gifts my chiropractic mentors gave to me was this ability to discern what a yes feels like in my body and what a no feels like in my body. So you can equate that yes and that no to something that is a truth and a lie, essentially, right? Or a yes and a no. And when I look back at the way that I've made decisions in my life, I think instinctively I've just been following what feels good, what feels like a yes. And not necessarily in like a hedonistic way, but in just a way of like, my truth feels like it's that. Let me move towards that. And I really I came into the world just very with like a tenacity and a drive, and this ability to like see what I want and just make it happen. And so I think that honestly just is in my nature. I wouldn't necessarily say that's like a product of my parents getting divorced. It's like, no, that's just like me. That's like who I am. And I was having a conversation with a gal who is part of my team in the office, and I was saying to her today that I think I've come to realize that this ability to have an idea and like move on it quickly is more unique than I thought. It's like I work with people all the time, and I love to, have conversations with people about how they can birth their dreams into reality and like fulfill these nudges that they're getting over and over and over again. And so I think I've just, for a lifelong time now, I've just been following these nudges, and I can now just start to name that is something unique to me and my design, and like my ability to listen to that. And I love to then help others commune with that and learn how to listen to that for themselves too.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess that's the old nature versus nurture, and it's an interesting perspective to hear you really feel that's how you came into the world. And I'm also extremely interested in this idea of how you can really get in touch with your body. I've been doing a lot of that this year and working somatically and kind of finding space to be able to go inward and get the answers as I believe that they're all there.
Yeah, totally.
And you can access them in the body, but that's not how I've spent most of my life. Most of my life has been in my head. I guess it's, in the body, but the mind is really taking me outside of the body most of the time. And so that's a whole other interesting subject, which we're going to get to. But tell me, so you go abroad, and maybe naively, tell me about that experience.
Yeah. So, I applied for a visa. I was, fall of 2018, I'm doing this internship. I was not getting paid. And the Norwegian government, I learned the hard way, considers an internship something paid. So I applied for a visa. I literally had bought flights to go. I actually went and spent, a month in Israel. I was going to go to Israel before I went to Norway for however long, moved my life over there. And it's literally like a week or two before I'm supposed to leave and fly to Israel. And I got a notice from the Norwegian government that my original visa had gotten denied. And it got denied because I had checked this box. It said, I've been doing an internship in Norway. And so they were like, you were working without a visa. You can't come here. We can't give you a visa now. So I had to appeal it. So I got all my paperwork in order, appealed it, went to Israel, was like, I guess I'll book my flight to go to Norway once I get a hopeful green light. And so ended up getting a green light, went to Norway. In Norway, you pay a 3 months of a security deposit on an apartment. It's not like here where you just pay 1 month, so pay that. In Norway, it also takes 3 months to open a bank account. I just had no idea. I literally had no idea. I didn't know what questions to ask. I'm definitely a big like trial and error type of gal, so it's like I'll figure it out as I go. However, had no idea that in Norway it takes 3 months to open a bank account. And so I was working for a guy. I hadn't yet found my voice in terms of like me being able to really speak up to him and ask for what I needed. And I really have Evan to thank for that. I will say he really was a catalyst for me in that process. But I like wasn't getting paid over there. This guy wanted me to collect payment through PayPal. I was like, through PayPal? What? I didn't know that I was like essentially starting a practice from scratch out of this guy's office in Oslo. And I just was so naive. I thought he had like a spillover of people for me. But I didn't ask any questions. So I can't even fault this guy. Like it's totally on me. But I got there, and because I had spent some time there the previous year, I like had already had some friends and a bit of community. And so like my social life there was absolutely incredible. I had amazing people in my life, and Norwegians and Scandinavians as a whole are typically very insular. So like they've been friends with the same people their whole lives. Like all of the women plan to have their babies at the same time so they can all have their like year of maternity leave together. So to then break into this like Norwegian friend group and just have this very different experience in Oslo was absolutely incredible. These are still some friends that are near and dear to me, very, very close. And so for that, like I wouldn't trade it for anything. I learned a lot along the way, in that process. I met Evan. So Evan is my husband. He's also a chiropractor, for those of you who do not know. Him and I work together at the Inside Space, and Evan is French, but grew up mostly in Spain. And so at the time, Evan was living in Spain. Some mentors of mine from the US were coming to teach a chiropractic seminar in Barcelona. And so I was at this point where I'm living in Oslo and I'm feeling like, what the fuck am I doing here? This is insane. This is ridiculous. I feel like I'm ready to call it. So I go down to Barcelona, I go to this chiropractic seminar, and I see this cute guy, and I had to go talk to him because that's my nature. And him and I then kept in touch. So this is like the end of November of 2019. Literally I went home over Christmas and I was like ready to be done with Europe, and I was ready to call it and maybe come back to Columbus. But again, I was like, I just want to see more of the world. Like I haven't found that place that really feels like home yet. I want to find it. I'm determined. And so anyways, I end up going back to Norway. Evan comes to visit me in Oslo, and it was like, wow, there's really something here. So fast forward, we really didn't spend all that much time together in person, but Evan is like the master of online research. That is so not my thing. I'd rather sit down and have a conversation and like learn in that kind of way. But Evan found a way essentially that I could move to Spain without having to go through the whole visa process, yet still have the same rights to live and work in Spain as he had as a resident. So it was like, great. Let's do it. Let's do it. Stakes seem low. I'll just go. I'll try it out. I'll start a practice. I'll do what I can do anywhere else in the world. And the worst that happened is I don't like it. This doesn't work out. And I go back home. And so I moved to Spain, March 11th of 2020. Norway was like totally shutting down along with the rest of Europe. And it was like, if I'm getting out of here, I've got to get out of here now. And so I moved to Spain, packed up my bags and my portable table and just dropped it all in Evan's family's home. At the time, Evan's mom and sister were living up in Andorra, trying to, start some things up there. And Andorra is like a tiny country between Spain and France in the mountains. And it's one of those places like Singapore where the income taxes are very low. And what people don't seem to know about Spain's like a beautiful place for Americans or people with higher salaries to go and visit. But in Spain, they absolutely crush you with taxes. So if you're a resident in Spain and you're not using things like the medical system, you're not really getting much in return. So his family was trying to then move up to Andorra and really shift their life to be there. And so in the spirit of wanting to be the low maintenance new girlfriend, we went up to Andorra and we were going to stay for a long weekend. And I packed half a backpack full of clothes. and was like, that's it. We'll be back in 2 or 3 days. And we did not come back for 3.5 months because the world shut down. And so I was in this 3-bedroom apartment, 1,000 square feet, with Evan and his mom, his dad, his sister, his grandmother, and a dog. And Europe was very strict in that time, where you really couldn't go outside much unless you're going to the grocery store, walking a dog, or going to the doctor. And Evan's family had a toy Yorkie at the time named Simba. And I would look at that dog and be like, please, dude, you got to walk. You got to walk with me. But, we take him outside and he'd walk a block and look at us and be like, can you pick me up now? Can we be done? So it was a really interesting time. And, my mom, my sister, my family were like, I don't understand. Why don't you come home? And I was like, I can't. I got to stay. I was following one of those nudges. And it was just like, it's okay that they don't understand. I have to do this. And so we really just made the most of that time. And I healed a lot in that time, especially through my relationship with Evan's mom. There were just some things that she shared with me in French. So she speaks French and Spanish, and fortunately I took French in high school and felt very connected to the language. And, they brought it out in me. It had to come out. And when she speaks, she's a very blunt woman. But there's something interesting about someone being blunt with you in another language, because we don't have the same attachment to the words or to the tonality. So it was just this interesting time where she was just like laying down some truth as to what she was seeing in me or in my story or in the way that I was navigating. And it was just like, holy shit. Like I didn't know. I didn't know.
What was it? What was she saying?
Yeah, I had a feeling you were going to ask that, Brett.
Say what you share what you want.
Yeah.
Don't feel like you have to.
Nah, it's okay. And part of that story of wanting to be really, really loyal to my mom.
Yeah, it's okay. And you can be. You don't have to say anything you don't want.
No, it's okay. It's all good. But I hadn't realized that I had this tendency to make excuses for her for when she maybe wasn't showing up her best. And his mom looked me dead ass in the eye one evening and she just said, you don't have to make excuses for her anymore. And I was defensive at first because I was like, what? I'm not doing that, and then I sat with it and I realized how much I was doing that, and yes, I can have the compassion for all of it. And but it was something that really interrupted a big pattern in my system that I don't know that would have been interrupted otherwise. So it felt very significant. So yeah, so we were there for 3.5 months. Somewhere in that time frame, Evan woke up one day and said, let's move to Singapore. I looked at him like he had 3 heads and I said, you're batshit crazy. Have you seen the state of the world? This is like spring of 2020. And the thing that we were trying to avoid is that if Evan were to move to the US, he would have to take boards and go through a series of really rigorous tests and just a bunch of bureaucratic bullshit to essentially be able to practice his profession, my profession in this country or in this state. And so we were really trying to avoid that for a long time. But Singapore was a place that, accepted my degree, his degree, and he had a burning desire to go there. I did not. I was like, no, I'm not doing this. I just like sat with it. I was really in my body. It was just like, oh, I'm not. And so I just felt a bit lost then for a couple of months. By June, we were back in Spain at Evan's family's home in Sitges, just south of Barcelona. And I just didn't know what to do. He was like pursuing this job in Singapore and I was just lost. And in like true Evan fashion, famous for his bluntness, he handed me a USB with a Joe Dispenza seminar, like 8 hours of Joe Dispenza. And he handed it to me and he said, don't talk to me until you're done with this. And I was like, fuck you. But also like, all right, give it to me, And so I sat and I did the meditations and I listened to Joe Dispenza and I went through it and I sobbed and I felt and whatever. And Joe Dispenza is all about stepping into the unknown and allowing the frequency of the unknown find you, right? And that's in total alignment with my system too, where it's like, how can I, as Gabby, consciously conceive of what is best for me? I can lock into a frequency of how I want to feel, when something is acquired or achieved or whatever, but like I can't know exactly what that's supposed to look like. And that's a lot of what Joe Dispenza is here to talk about. And so I just had this big cathartic moment of realizing that Singapore actually is the unknown. At what other time in my life am I going to be able to do this, to call this in, to have this brand new experience? And something just flipped in me like a switch. Yes, I'm going to do that. And so there was a pediatric and prenatal office there on the island, as they say, that was hiring. And I had been connecting with them a little bit, earlier on in the summer of 2020 when I was like dipping a toe in the idea of going to Singapore, and reached back out to them and, essentially got a visa rolling. And so it was a very funny, contrasting experience, this visa situation where I was like at the helm doing this myself, moving to Norway, versus in Singapore where everything's very, it's run very tightly, and I felt very taken care of in that experience. And so my visa gets approved, things are rolling, and then all of a sudden Evan's contract falls apart. And at the same time, he got an offer to move to Belgium for a chiropractic job there. And so I just remember laying in bed in Spain, just feeling like, holy fucking shit, I'm going to Singapore by myself. Like, I can't believe this. This wasn't even my idea. Yet I was going for myself. I wasn't going just to follow Evan. I was going because that's what resonated for me as truth in my body. And so I ended up coming back to the States, September of 2020. I bounced around, saw some friends, spent some time with family. And then November 6th, I don't know why I remember the date, but I do. November 6th, I moved to Singapore and had to quarantine in a hotel room for 2 weeks with no windows. Every single meal was like delivered to my door. And I remember just like setting this very strong intention of that time being really productive and useful. And it was. I did a lot of writing, which is something that I'm really passionate about writing, and I love to write, about my own lived experience, probably similar to you. And so I really used that time for what I could. And I broke out of, my 14-day quarantine and started to live life in Singapore. And it was just a very weird time to be there. You had to wear masks every second that you were outside, essentially. It was very strict. And at the end of the day, like I was working for somebody. I knew in my heart and in my gut that I didn't ever really want to be working for somebody, but I had this concept and this idea that I needed to learn more before I opened up my own practice. And so that's, what I was doing. I set out to learn more. And so one of the biggest takeaways I have actually from working in Singapore is the importance of family. In Singapore, you have 3 generations all living under the same house, under the same roof. And to witness these families, we took care of a lot of Malay families, and it's just a really beautiful culture. And they have a lot of kids. And so it's like, the parents would come in with the big 2 and the grandparents would come in another time with the little 2. And just the way that family was so revered and valued, it just hadn't hit me in that kind of way until I worked in this office in Singapore. And it's something that I also strive to bring into the Insight space, is like that reverence for family and for how we support each other on a generational level.
Yeah, interesting. I didn't know any of that, and yet it makes a lot of sense because, now I know how the family aspect came in, because that's very present in the Insight space. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about how you created the Insight space.
Totally.
I remember, I don't remember who told me about you. I really don't. Oh, I guess it was Kate.
Probably Kate.
It was Kate. I do. Yeah, actually. So yeah, Kate, who's been on the show and who's a mutual friend and an awesome human, also a healer. And she told me about you, and you were working out of your dad's house at the time.
Yeah.
And I remember it was just like going to this house on No Bixby Road, which I remember because my grandparents lived on No Bixby Road when I was a kid. And I had a lot of fond memories. We lived in Akron, and we would travel, and we would always, kind of drive up the hill to No Bixby Road. And it's funny now that I think about it, because I really hadn't thought about this. It felt very much like not in the way I knew Columbus. And because it was like these like kind of rolling streets and, sort of a beautiful little street. And so I remember, coming over to your dad's house, and it was beautiful. There was this, beautiful view, and the home was pretty and well designed, and then it was like this revolving door of like all of Columbus that was like pulling in and out of the driveway. I'm like, who is this person and what's going on here? And I had known chiropractic in the way that I had known it, which was just crack me. And so Yeah, let's talk about kind of, how it ended up evolving into what it is now. I guess this is maybe two spaces further, and I think
Yeah,
landed in a long-term home now.
totally.
But yeah, tell me about kind of how the concept and the space was created. We can talk about, where we started off, the work that you're doing, but
Sure.
talk us through how you got there.
So after, 2 years of running around the world looking for this geographical place that would feel like home, I really got this felt sense that home is going to grow around me wherever I commit to being. And, from Singapore, I ended up moving to Belgium for a couple of months. And in Belgium, I was like, I got to go home. I got to go home. And I didn't know if I was going home to just reset or if I was going home to like start a business and a community. And so I moved back to Columbus in October of 21, and I just felt so lost. And I got connected with Kate Borges about a week and a half after I moved home. And I just started to share with her really what I do and why it's different. And classic Kate, before I could even exit her garage, she asked me if I wanted to trade services. And I said, well, yeah, but don't you want to like experience it first before you just commit? But, we know Kate and she's all in. And so Kate came over to my dad's house where I, landed as I came back to Columbus at the time. And I checked her, I adjusted her, and I didn't really even know that she had such a profound experience. But the next thing I know, Kate is starting to send me people. And Kate sending me people, and I just had this moment, about 3 weeks into being back in Columbus where, in chiropractic, we call this a thought flash, THOT, not THOUGHT. Thought is like a transmission, and so I just had this thought flash and it was just like, you're here today. Just start. And I had built my website over the summer. The name, The Inside Space, again, I didn't want to put chiropractic in the name at the time. It had just come. I just knew I wanted something different. I wanted something that was more, just more robust in that sense. And so, early November of 21, I launched my website and I committed to posting on Instagram every day for 90 days. Cause again, I was like, I can write, I can like tap into this gift and share in this way that I really love, just to start to build a presence in that kind of way. But I really have Kate to thank for really getting this practice started. And so we started on this 5x8 orange rug that is still now in our first visit space in the new practice. And, really it was just like this revolving door. It was just a total word of mouth experience. No one's really like finding me on Instagram, which is great and fine. I prefer the word of mouth, like pre-vetted anyways. And so I just had this very tight-knit community of people who were curious. And I think that was really the magic of this, where people weren't coming in with this preconceived notion of what they were going to get. It's like, I've always said this, we have this masculine framework that allows for people to book their appointments and figure out where they're going and do all that like left brain stuff. But when you walk through the door of the inside space, whether it was at my dad's house or the carriage house above, the yoga carriage, or our current space over in Grandview, it's like, now we get to play. Now we get to dance with something different. And you don't have to be able to name what that is. But what matters is that there's like an openness and a curiosity to it. And I couldn't be more grateful for Kate for really like launching this for me in the way that she did.
Yeah, I think there's no question. I mean, sometimes it just takes somebody like that to, step up and share. I think there's like a thing that happens often, and I see it, maybe even prevalent in the wellness space, where it's like a gatekeeping kind of thing, where everybody wants to like sort of own, Gabby or Kate or Massage Garage. And it's really nice when someone's not doing that, right? And they're just like sharing whatever it is. It makes it a little harder to schedule sometimes. So I have my lock on my time with Kate.
That's fair.
But yeah, like why not, share the goodness with others that you care about and you love, and and it can be so impactful as it has with you.
Yeah.
And so, kind of coming back around to the work that you do and talking about it. And it's funny you mentioned Joe Dispenza, because I was thinking about him as you were talking at the beginning of our conversation. His name came into my head as, I wasn't thinking about him as an influence, but some of the language you were using just reminded me of the work that he does. And so, yeah, it's such a fascinating thing because it does feel like you are very much in your own body, and then kind of connecting to your clients. And Evan's different, right? And yet, you know, he has his own very similar way of doing, I think, the same thing. That's how I experience him too,
Yeah.
right? You both kind of come at it differently. I think I might have even tweaked you a little bit the last time I said something about how I go to you for different things.
All is well.
But yeah, no, I think Evan, you know, has this, as you said earlier, this kind of more like direct kind of, I don't know if it's a cultural thing or just his personality, but you know, he kind of comes at you really directly. And you kind of find your way in a little bit, and you both get to the same spot. And I meant what I said, actually. There's times where I usually just take whoever's first available. So
It's okay,
don't
Brett.
overthink it.
We don't take any of it personally. Don't you worry.
It all goes to the same bottom line. But I do sometimes like the different approaches. But since you're here, we're going to talk about yours. and yours does feel like it's so, and again, this is just my own experience. So tell me what's really happening. But it feels like you are so very much like feeling into it and kind of finding the way in. And it is a combination of both skill that you've learned, right? Because once you arrive at, you know, the place to go in, there's a lot of different techniques that can be used to get the same result. And I'm just sort of making shit up.
You're
I don't
doing
know
great.
anything about chiropractic other than being, you know, in your care. So sometimes, as we were saying earlier, you might stand me up. Sometimes you might be standing on the table. Sometimes you're behind me, but you're sort of feeling your way into this, which I don't know if that's taught, if that's just kind of learned. I don't know. You tell me, I'll shut up. Like, how are you doing it?
It's a really good question. So in the practice, people will hear me talk, you know, the educated versus the innate. It's not so much a versus, you know, but it's like when I'm stepping into the practice, I'm really here to work through my own innate intelligence. So in chiropractic, innate intelligence is this thing that's working for you 100%. It's here to help you express as fully as possible. And an example I like to use is, you know, when you scrape your knee or you cut yourself, do you have to tell your body what to do in order to heal it and mend it and not leave a scar? No, your body just knows how to do that. And so that's your body's innate intelligence doing its thing. And so when people come in and lay on the table, the goal is to have an innate to innate connection as opposed to an educated to educated connection. So when people were saying they're living predominantly in their head, it's because your educated's running the goddamn show, you know, and that certainly serves a purpose. And to what extent? And so the lineage of chiropractic that I come from is through this lens of how can we commune more deeply with our innate and step out of our educated. And it's not about ditching your educated, because it certainly has a purpose, but it's about giving your educated a job so your innate can step in and do its thing, do what it does. And so when I talk about, you know, listening to what a yes feels like in my body versus a no, it's like that is like an innate yes and an innate no, not from the educated mind, so to speak. And so my mentors, I have two that I just am so grateful for. They've really raised me and raised a group of us in this way of rapport-based adjusting. So again, like, this isn't about fixing anything. This is about seeing you for all that you are and supporting your nervous system and your innate intelligence and expressing more fully. So if your nervous system is in a state where it can perceive more safety in your world, internally and externally, then your innate intelligence can express more at the forefront. If your nervous system is in a state where, you know, you're feeling like you need to defend and protect and experience your world through a lens of hypervigilance, your innate intelligence is going to still be 100%, but that 100% expression is going to inherently be less than if you're in a body that's perceiving safety. And so With that, I am here to simply follow rapport. And that rapport typically isn't local. So people think of chiropractic and they think of neck or back pain. And it's like, oh, I hurt here, touch me here. And it's like, but what is this connected to? Everything else. And not just physically, right? But chemically, mentally, emotionally, energetically, and spiritually. And so the rapport, for some people is like all the way out here. Other people, the rapport is like a light contact on their body. For other people, the rapport is like a deep compression into their system. Sometimes I have more rapport with your system when you're seated at the end of the table, and I need to like climb around you a little bit, to access. And so I personally don't want to have a barrier as to how I can meet your rapport, as deeply as I possibly can in these places of connection in your body based on the limitations of my physicality, right? So I want to be in this place of unconscious competence where I can follow these threads of connection, rapport, and a window, as we call it, in vitalistic chiropractic as fully as I possibly can, so your system can then express more on the other side. And so when we go from a mentality of things are stuck and fixated and I have to get this moving, right? It's like, no, your body has so intelligently, experienced these compensations of quote unquote fixation to protect you for moments when something in your system was not able to perceive safety. So I don't want to go and break through these walls your body has so intelligently put in place. I want to go where there's ease, where there's access, where there's an invitation. And that's really what I feel is so different at the Inside space, because we're not looking for what's wrong with you.
Yeah, interesting. So a couple of things I was curious about as you were talking. I was just thinking about my own experience. And I wonder if it's easier to work with some people than others. If so, what makes it easier? And I'm asking because I have some ideas about that, but I want to hear what you have to say.
Listen, we all have people that we really love to work with, and not just like on an individual basis, but like, some of my favorite people to meet on the table or at the Inside space are what we'd call like the spiritual athletes who are like, show me what else I can purge, walk with me as I meet more of myself by way of this work, and those people's systems typically reflect more openness, more ease, more curiosity. And it's easier almost to like pick up on the rhythm. When people have predominantly lived a lot of years in their heads or like neck up, that's a lot of energy of mobilization, defense, protection. There can be more of a challenge in like bringing them down into their system, but I wouldn't say that they're not fun to work with, or I don't enjoy that time.
Yeah, well, you're right. I asked, specifically, what is it easier? Because you might like the people that, are more challenged because you can make a bigger impact. I don't know, but sure. But I was wondering really, because I was thinking about it, as I am on the table, the experience that I have is oftentimes, kind of reflective of the work that I am doing internally, where, there might be like a, like surrender, or getting into the body, a letting go, receiving, right? Allowing somebody else to have control of your body, trusting. I mean, these are all things that I think allow for the work to, go better or go deeper or something. But they're things that I'm also having to like exercise, or work on, or have gotten better at. Sure. And I'm conscious of it while I'm on the table. Especially for me, like the neck in particular, that's one where I feel myself wanting to kind of tighten up a bit. It's a little, I don't know if it's scary, if it's some sort of trauma response, if it's just natural that, when someone's about to shake your head like that, you Sure. get tense. But I really have to kind of I have to like allow myself, I have to kind of work at it a bit to like, okay, Brett, let go here, loosen in, let the body sort of relax, And it's all done. We haven't never talked about this before.
No, we haven't. I'm
right,
excited to hear.
Yeah, it's all done like, in this like dance that you're leading, I feel like, where you kind of are helping me without saying anything. And then there's like other things that are coming in too that I've been working on, or, have come from other experiences or modalities or whatever. And, but it does feel, I know, like, I don't know if people that don't go to you or aren't like in this world, maybe this sounds like super woo woo. It's like, what the fuck? You're going to a chiropractor, but like that's why I said it's, you're a healer, right? Which I do think people get like a little tripped up on the word. It's like, ooh, wow, woo woo healers, right? But like, no, there's a healing that's happening. It doesn't mean it's like you're healed, right? But it's like every time I go into the space, there's something that's happening that's allowing me to release things in my mind and in my body. And you are facilitating that experience. And it is a cooperative thing that we do together. Totally. Right? Because if I'm not doing my part, you're probably going to crack some things, but it feels like it just goes better when it's, kind of a little more synergistic. I don't know.
So we can speak then to the rhythm.
Yeah.
When people are coming in and they've spent more time in their bodies, it's more easeful, I'll say, to like connect into our mutual rhythm. Mm-hmm. There's almost like a fourth rhythm. There's like your rhythm, my rhythm, our rhythm together. And then there's like the rhythm of innate. And so it's funny because like your perception is that you're following me, but what I perceive is actually I'm following your innate rhythm, and I'm here to help. Not help. I don't know. I'm so over the word like help, support, but like I'm here to facilitate this process of amplification of your innate rhythm, and that's my gift, is to be like an interpreter and a translator of that, so your system can go, oh, I know what we're doing here.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense. And actually, I don't know who's leading, right. But it does feel very much like you are paying attention to something and then kind of, taking that as like data to decide what the next, move is. And it is a rhythm. Yeah. Okay. So the other thing that's really present, depending on what time of day you end up going to the space, is there's a lot of kids and like babies. So talk a little bit about the work of working with children and infants, because I know that's a prevalent part of what you're doing.
I just love this shit. Like, I love taking care of everybody, but there's something so special about taking care of an infant. Their system is just truly raw and uninhibited, and there's something so just humbling about getting to work with a population who isn't able to advocate vocally for themselves, And the reason I'm so passionate about working with infants is because the way that we come into the world really matters. Our nervous system is being wired literally from very early on in utero, from the way that our mothers perceive their world. We're learning how to perceive ours. Do our mothers view their world through a lens of healing, growth, restoration, of safety, of trust, of resilience, of adaptability? If yes, predominantly, right? Baby's going to receive that same wiring and go, yeah, this world's pretty good to be in. If a mother is really going through it when she's pregnant, or historically she's got a lot of things that she has stored in her own body from an accumulation of her own life or that of her lineage, that's going to potentially tell a different story to that infant who's wiring their nervous system and going, ooh, is this place hostile? Do I need to protect myself? So when we come into the world, either with a sense of, yeah, I'm okay, my mom showed me that I can trust my world, or fuck, this is gonna be hard. That's going to make a massive difference in terms of how we then go on to grow and view our world for the rest of our life, and then so on and so on and so on for next generation of kids and beyond. And so part of why I'm also so passionate about this is because there's a huge opportunity to reclaim sovereignty. And sovereignty involves getting back into our bodies and getting back into touch with that sense of like that internal truth. Is this a yes for me, or is this a no, not right now? And when we look at how birth is going in America and in Ohio, and there are certain hospitals that are absolutely on my shit list as places where I do not send my mothers, and I try to dissuade them from going because things like intervention rates and C-section rates are astronomically higher in some places than others. Those things are all impacting how our children are perceiving their world, again, both internally and externally. So it's a big deal when a child, for example, is having a challenging time feeding. They are learning that their world is a place where their needs aren't going to be met and they're not going to be satiated and nourished. Again, how are these things wiring our brains and our systems of perception for the rest of our lives? And it's not to say that like moms and dads are doing a bad job, everyone's doing their best. And this is where I love to bring this education to the forefront, because if we can teach kids that they can experience safety in their bodies from, day 0, day 7, day 14, I think that we can grow into much more resilient, healthy, vital adults who have a deeper sense of sovereignty. And that really creates a big shift, both in our immediate families, but also in our larger communities.
Yeah. And I don't know, for me, and maybe this is a good place to kind of start to wrap up, but it does kind of bring me back to this conversation we were having earlier about your parents' divorce and the norms that society and family live in, and how then that can be generationally moved forward, where a lot of this trauma, and even if it's little t trauma, sure, is landing in the next generation. And that can start, and again, I'm speaking sort of as an armchair, whatever, but I know that can start in the womb, and it can certainly start in early childhood, and it's unintentional, it's unconscious, but when the parents, because it's not just the mothers, totally, that when the parents are stressed or, in their heads, not in their bodies, all the things that, most young people are, to be able to go somewhere and get some release of that, even if it's short, even if it's small, it's something, and it might be cumulatively something significant. So I think it's beautiful. I think, whether you connect that dot or not, I see it as you really trying to make a difference in solving some of this generational trauma and totally, healing.
And that's something I'm really passionate about, because I want people to remember how much power they have and how much say they have in their own lives and in their own family unit. What we talk about and what we see over and over again, in the inside space and so far beyond, is that this like 2-parent household thing is really not working for the vast majority of people. And coming back to this concept of family and the generational availability, we'll say, of grandparents and aunts and uncles and just people being around. It's like we used to live like that, in the village, in the tribe. And we talk about wanting to recreate this village. And I think people have been asking, like, where is it? And part of what I really wanted to birth, by creating the Insight Space was truly that village. So we can start to come together and mothers and fathers and everyone in between can come and have this place where they can also feel held and their children can also feel held. And some of my favorite days at the Insight Space are when it's like packed full of kids and there's a mom on a table and another mom's tending to, 6 children playing with the toys over by the, by that aluminum table that's been with me in all of these spaces. And there's just this sense of like true community that I have always dreamed of by way of the Insight Space. And I feel, and I've heard from people who've been coming in, whether they've been coming in for a couple weeks or months or really since the beginning, like you guys have been, that there is a huge impact on how they are now able to show up as parents and show up as individuals and the human, and they're able to do that with a lot more compassion for themselves and just this understanding that, this isn't, these systems aren't necessarily working for anybody. And what can we do about it? What can we do? What can shift? And so for people to catch a glimmer of what that can feel like if it were to be different by coming into the Inside Space, that's like a literal dream come true.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, I think that it's happening, and people are getting a lot out of it. And I love having the opportunity to be with you always, but to benefit from the work. And then, now to really hear you share the full story, because I think it provides some helpful context into, the work that you do, which is, the point of this show, is to show people how you can use your entire life experience, and how, in your case, which I think is really, really important work, how you can learn to listen, and trust, and it is often in the body, but these are feelings and downloads or intuitive thoughts and feelings that when trusted in the face of the fears or the norms or the parental or societal judgments, something really beautiful can happen. And doesn't mean it's easy, but in the end, I think it's really worth it. And so, I commend you for all of that, and certainly for the work that you're doing at Inside Space. You and Evan are an awesome asset for the city. And I think, what I feel increasingly passionate about is, this idea that healing or self-help or, mental, physical work, it takes the shape of a lot of different forms, and there are a lot of different modalities out there, and there's not one kind of silver bullet, especially today with all the kind of trendy, heavy hitter stuff that people are running around doing and advocating for, which I think has its place. You can, right here, get to Inside Space, get to Massage Garage. You can do some stuff that, can really in the cumulative be massively transformative. So anyway, final thoughts, anything you want to share with the audience?
So much of this just comes back to the fact that we all have enough. There's nothing outside of self that we could possibly add that isn't already present within. And I know that sounds like potentially overly cliche, but really when we are able to start to quiet the noise and really get in touch with our intuition, with our innate, we really do have an access to an absolute wealth of answers and wisdom and knowledge. And really my invitation to people is for them to allow themselves to be guided by that a little bit more often, and then just stay curious and see what shifts in your life,
Amen. All right. Gabby Goldach, the Inside Space.
Thank you, Brett.
Make sure everybody knows where to find you. But thanks for taking the time.
Thank you so much.